theoriafilm.org. That's www.theoriafilm.org.
Welcome to Live with the Louhs with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Louh, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. We're so grateful that you're joining us on this Tuesday, June 14th. My name is Father Nicholas Louh. I'm the parish priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And tonight I'm joined by my lovely wife and co-host, Dr. Roxanne Louh.
Good evening, everyone.
Roxanne's a clinical psychologist. And tonight, as always, we're so grateful that you're joining us, because if you're joining us for the very first time on Live with the Louhs, our show hopes and prays that we merge both faith and psychology to give you some guiding principles to live by in your walk of faith. And the show airs every single Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. right here on Ancient Faith Radio. You know, before we dive into tonight's topic, I do want to welcome and encourage all of you, if you haven't already, to join us on our social media pages. You can go onto Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And our platforms are all very simple to follow, all under the headings of The Louhs. That's Louhs. In fact, all of our sermons you can find under our YouTube channel at The Louhs. And you can also register for our daily inspirational messages that we send out every single day at 7 a.m. You'll get it in your email inbox. You can go and register right now for them by going to our website at thelouhs.com. Again, it's Louhs.com. Click on that subscribe button. All you have to do is simply put in your email address. You're only going to receive inspirational messages. We won't share anything else with you, but just something to lift you up all throughout your day. And as you all know by now, we published a book a couple of years ago right here at Ancient Faith Publishing called Renewing You, a Priest, a Psychologist, and a Plan. It's just a book that Roxanne and I poured a lot into. Basically takes 8 of the largest topics that we see as a priest and psychologist and address them from both a faith and psychological perspective, and hopefully to give you some just principles. So if right now as you're listening to this show, you're struggling with your marriage, or maybe you're just kind of struggling in your walk of faith, you kind of came after Easter or Pascha, and you're just kind of not really feeling like you have, just kind of blah, not really growing at all in your faith, that's chapter 1. Or if you're wanting to just kind of, you have some negative thoughts that you just keep just kind of guiding you, and your thought life isn't as what it needs to be, it's kind of leading you down a negative lifestyle, then we just encourage you, that's chapter 2. All of these different topics we cover in this book, Renewing You. You can find out more about it right here on Ancient Faith. Just go to store.ancientfaith.com. It's also on audible.com, so we have it recorded in our own voices. So we invite you to definitely take a look at this book. We also would love to have you join our conversation tonight, especially tonight. We're doing a show that's really all about you. And so we invite you to call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And also, we are broadcasting our show live on our Facebook page, the Louhs Facebook page, as well as Ancient Faith's Facebook page. So feel free to share a comment in the comment line. We'll definitely get to it in our show. So today, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is a show dedicated to you. Every couple of months, Roxanne and I just like to give an opportunity to just answer some of the questions that you are going through, that you're dealing with from a priest and a psychological perspective. And as we share this with you, obviously know that this is not a substitute for speaking with your therapist or for your own parish priest. They're going to know you better than we will. But just to kind of give you a word of encouragement, to kind of just guide you in your walk of faith. So let's get started. Here's a question we just got just a few moments before we went live on the show tonight. It's an anonymous question. The question is this: I am still single at age 50. I have a good life. I have a great career, but I would love to be married. I know God walks with me, so I'm never alone. But I find myself mourning that I will never have children or grandchildren. I know God has a purpose or a reason for everyone and everything, but right now I'm very sad about this. The question is basically asking us is how does he deal with the fact that he is single and at age 50? And Roxanne, if you wanted to kind of start that out, and then I'll kind of share my thoughts to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that I think has to do with really just being patient and waiting on anything it is that we want. As human beings, we have wants, we have needs, we have hopes, we have dreams and desires for our life.
Mm-hmm.
And wanting to be married, I see as one of those dreams, and one of those hopes. And I think it is tough in the waiting. I mean, I think we'd be remiss if we said, while you're waiting on something, that it's easy,
Mm-hmm.
that we don't, get hopeless or we start to question ourselves or enter self-doubt. Is this really the plan for me? I mean, I think those are all the kind of natural questions our flesh takes us to. Um, but I think it's important to come back to remembering how God has worked in your life, through your life, throughout your life, at other times where maybe you were in the waiting for something else. Because depending on the stage of life that you enter, if you think of your life as sort of chapters, we've had to wait on a lot of different things at
Mm-hmm.
different stages in our life. And it's often not until we have something that we stop wanting it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had to wait. What did we rely on to help us wait? And how did we grow in that waiting?
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that sometimes in singleness, either we aren't ready or the partner he's prepared for us isn't ready.
Oh, I love that.
There's a lot of work that's being done in the waiting, and it isn't always on us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes it is. There's a lot we learn. If we can be content in being single, we can also be content in our marriages when the relationship feels rocky. There's a lot of power in acceptance and learning how to tolerate the distress of being uncomfortable in something that actually is pretty a powerful tool in marriage, because marriage is not always an easy ride. You have to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to ride the wave of discomfort, how to manage expectations, how to not what you want. And in fighting sometimes and in conflict, you have to learn how to be content within yourself while
Mm-hmm.
waiting on that change to occur. And so there's a lot of growth that can happen in ourselves, but there's also growth that could be potentially being had in that partner that God is preparing for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think, just to add to what you're sharing, Roxanne, I think it's so important that, I think the world that we're living in is oftentimes telling us that we can only find our true self by someone else. And, the old movies that we would see, the movies that came out in the 80s and the 90s when we were, teenagers, where it would say, this person completes me. And sometimes we have allowed that kind of notion that other person, that we need that other person to be complete, that spouse, that girlfriend, that boyfriend, or even for that matter, that friend. And I think that one of the things that Christ tells us throughout the Bible, and what you should know is that the Bible is not quiet about this. Christ tells us to seek him first, because no one can complete us. Anything that you always remember us sharing this, that anything that you idolize, well, later on you'll end up demonizing. We do a lot of marriage classes and counseling, and oftentimes when I meet with couples, they'll share with me that what they loved when they first met that spouse, the fact that, he loves sports, he's such a fun person to be around with, and then later on, 5 or 10 years into the marriage, they're sharing, that's all he does is want to watch sports. He sits on the couch, he doesn't, do anything to help around. So, sometimes it's because we've kind of put these people, our spouse, in a place where only Christ deserves to be. And so what I would challenge you is, number one, seek the one while you're preparing for the two. If God has put the number two on you, if he's put that a desire for you to be married, then God has put that on your heart and allow that to happen. But in that waiting, as Roxanne beautifully stated, is seek the one, Christ. Continue to better your relationship with him. Continue to grow in your own walk of faith, knowing that Christ yearns for you to experience the joy that only he can give us, not by someone else that can give us that, but only through Christ who can give us. Because happiness, as sometimes people want to say, I just want to be happy if I just met this person. is based upon a circumstance, where joy is not based upon circumstances, it's based upon Christ. So number one, I would say just keep seeking the one, keep growing as Christ says, seek me first, in the Gospel of Matthew. And then number two, remember this, that once you are seeking that one, that, I believe that God goes into motion when we're seeking him, when he knows that we are following and drawing closer to him. I remember when I graduated the seminary, I remember that when I graduated the seminary, as you remember, Roxanne, I shared the story with you many times, there was this great deal of pressure that, hey, you're Nick, you're a seminarian, you're graduating, now you got to get married. In order for you to get married, in order for you to become a priest. And most seminarians deal with that question quite often, even during the time that they're in this school, is trying to find the pressure to find that right person. And I'll never forget that I remember someone telling me, seek the one while God prepares for you the number two. And I'll never forget that when I came home after graduating from the seminary, I just stood before the icon of Christ in our church, and I simply just said, Lord, I want to serve you. And I know that it's been on my heart that I find that I want to have a partner with me, and that whenever that happens, I just simply surrender that to you. I will follow your timing. I'm just simply following your will. And through a miraculous chain of events that we don't have really time to go through because we have so many questions coming in, I met Roxanne a week later. We're living in two different cities, did not have any interactions with each other or knew of each other at all. And then God just brought us together. So again, seek the one while you're preparing for the two, and then know that God's power is always working, that God is yearning for us to be finding the joy that only he provides with us. So just keep that focused in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, hope that answers your question, whoever wrote that in. And, I would one thing to just add, when something is placed on our heart like that, so deeply, a conviction, a hope, and it's something we can't stop thinking about, we have to trust that God has placed it there for a reason and has not removed it for a reason. So really trusting in those promises that he wants good for us, and those convictions he's placed on our heart are for a reason.
Right, because celibacy is a calling as well.
Exactly, yeah. It is. And so, yes, so we trust in that.
You're listening to Live with the Louhs, and tonight we're dedicating the show to answering questions that you may have. And so we invite you to call in at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can totally be anonymous if you don't feel comfortable sharing your question publicly or your name publicly, so please feel free to do so. You can also, though, we're broadcasting live on our Ancient Faith and the Louhs Facebook page, so feel free, friends, to share a comment there or a question. Here's another question that came in again right before our show. It says this: thank you so much, Louhs, for your ministry and all the love, time, and effort you put into it. I'm happily married and love my husband dearly for more than 25 years. We have very, different personalities, but this seems to work for us. But I do have one struggle with his character type that I could better react to, and that is his complaining about people, especially family members that make him upset. He goes on and on about whatever he's upset with, and even though he may be right, his complaining, though, makes me feel uncomfortable. I myself try to see the good in every person and challenge myself to see them through God's eyes, even when they hurt me. But if I try to give my husband tips about seeing the situation differently, in a more positive way, the way that I see it, then he gets upset with me. And then I'm the next one on his list to complain about. Yikes. So what words can I say to help him feel listened to without having to always agree with him, because it makes me feel like I'm falling into sin as gossiping about the person he's complaining about? And thank you so much, Diana, for sharing that email question.
What a great question. Listen, this is a tough one for a lot of reasons. One, because in order to relieve the stress of our partner, the tactic is to fully let them vent, fully let them explain, ask questions, validate their emotion, make space for them to feel, and fully align with whatever it is that they are feeling. Not necessarily stating that they are right for feeling that way. It has nothing to do with the content of their struggle. We're not agreeing or disagreeing. Just like when somebody, comes home and they say, well, gosh, I was reamed out at work for being late, but your spouse is always late. You're not sitting there and saying, well,
Hmm.
listen, you really do struggle with that. You need to take his advice to heart. You're
Hmm.
saying, gosh, that must have been humiliating and embarrassing. I'm really sorry that you had to deal with that today. So, really you're looking to align. But this is hard in family because some of what may be being shared is about somebody that you perhaps have feelings about, if it's a family member. So it may be easy to take it personally or to feel your own set of feelings about that. So that's hard. But one thing I will say is that, a glass half full never makes the glass half empty feel any better. And all that being said, that, when somebody is feeling negative about something, if we try to sort of take that optimistic view, if we try to kind of,
Hmm.
let's, kind of see it this way, or let's look on the bright side. You'll often find that people just kind of dig in more deeply, get further
Right,
entrenched,
right,
and they try
right.
to make their point with a bit more conviction, like, I can't believe you don't see it, because feelings that we try to ignore or sidestep don't usually go away. They just operate a bit more intensely.
Hmm.
And so we do well to connect with them. So I would say listen for the need or the feeling really that's underneath the complaint.
Hmm.
Really listen for the request or hope that they have underneath that complaint. So we kind of get away from the complaint and we sort of attach to, what is your desire? What are you looking for to be different? And when we acknowledge that, we can sometimes find ways to meet that need in other ways that don't involve judgment. They don't involve just staying in the kind of complaining area.
Hmm.
I call it the complaining zone, the marinating zone. There's power in inventing that, but then we do really kind of want to move into, okay, you're complaining that they're always late. Well, maybe we can kind of validate that being on time is important to you. All right, let's brainstorm. What are we going to do about it? What's within our control to get them here earlier? And
Hmm.
maybe that particular family member gets the invitation an hour ahead
Hmm.
of time. But really that, we're reflecting on that need, and brainstorming solutions is a much more productive place to end up, but it has to start with what the feeling was focused on.
Hmm.
If we try to just ignore that feeling, focus on the good parts of that person's character, we often miss, that important piece of connection that person needs. And we really do want to watch here the temptation to personalize. If something feels personal, or it's starting to upset you, or it's cutting deep, because it's about someone you love, that is important to share. It is important to kind of set a boundary there and maybe ask them to share their feelings in a way that's less blaming, less hurtful, and less attacking. So that is also an important caveat when you're talking about family members.
Can you help our listeners, Roxanne, maybe share with just a way that some ways that you can say that? Because I think for a lot of people, sometimes there are complaints about in-laws or complaints about family members, and you're taking that on, and there's a struggle with, maybe there may even be an acknowledgement or recognition that they are that way, but there's also the way it's being said is so allows it to be so confrontational. How would you suggest someone to share how that can make them feel
Sure.
uncomfortable?
Yeah. I mean, so take the idea of someone being late, right? It could be coming across as they have no consideration for anybody but themselves.
Hmm.
Look how they always show up late. How rude is that? They just don't care. It's
Hmm.
disrespectful. Okay. So these are all blaming, accusational,
Hmm.
critical, attacking, and they can be hurtful. And so we really want to, okay, I hear you. Being on time is important. Being on time is important. I get it.
Hmm.
What are we going to do in order to put that in our control? Because we can't raise them.
Hmm.
Somebody else did.
Hmm.
And so we really have to kind of come back to, is this a productive complaint that has a request attached to it? Or are we
Hmm.
just indulging the urge to criticize? Those are two very different things.
Hmm.
Okay. If our complaint has a constructive request, like, hey, let's make sure that we're inviting them over an hour early. And, we ask them to sort of share that in a way that's less hurtful. Okay, let's stop blaming and let's turn that into, hey, it's important that they're on time. What can we do here? Let's
Hmm.
brainstorm how to get them here earlier. That feels like something your spouse is going to be able to align with you on, because
Hmm.
we're problem solving, we're brainstorming, we're identifying a value,
Hmm.
but we're not blaming the person. We're not taking it personally, like they've done this on purpose. They don't care. We're not making a generalized attack
Hmm.
on their character,
Hmm.
such as they don't care about anybody but themselves. that would be an accusation and a criticism, and that would be hurtful. So we really want to sort of shift the dialogue, shift the language. And that's a very important boundary, because your partner can't align with you if the criticism is blaming, attacking, and critical. They can only align with you if it's productive and it's making a request. So that's an important line. You know, we have to listen for, is there a request attached here, something that we can do about this, something we can align on, or is it just I'm kind of indulging the urge to just criticize, and there's really nothing we can do about it. You know, and I love the quote. It's been said that the real purpose of conflict is to generate creativity. So we are looking to be creative and problem solving in our upset, not to be attacking, blaming, and criticizing, because that doesn't generate creativity. That generates reactivity.
And I think, to build on what you're sharing, Roxanne, as well, I think that, you know, as you're in that room with your spouse who's, you know, complaining, I think that one of the biggest struggles that we as a society do is we do a lot of complaining. And one of the things I oftentimes tell people is obviously the scripture is filled with how we should be, that our praising should always outweigh our complaining, that every day that we have is a blessing, that the fact that we can breathe, that we can see, the fact that we live in a great nation, the fact that we can go to church in peace. These are all things that we should be blessings for. So one of the things I would encourage you is as you're throwing these seeds out, these seeds that, as the Bible talks about, and throwing them out hopefully on some good soil, you want to look for opportunities also to kind of lift the conversation. So yes, honey, I understand that could be so frustrating, but you know, what would Jesus tell us to do in this situation? Or let's just pray for them. We don't know what they're kind of going through. Or, you know, I know that you're complaining, but you know, let me, you know, in some ways almost kind of shift the conversation to where we're not only trying to get the underlying of what they may be going through in that complaint, but also challenging them to lift up, to go up. And although it may take, there may be opportunities where that unfortunately that may get you in trouble, then what you could do is simply recognize that maybe I don't need to be in that environment in that moment. In other words, I may say to my spouse, I love you, I care about you, but I also recognize that I really don't want to have that. I really don't want to talk bad about people. So I'm just going to go to the other room. I love you, I care about you. I always tell people, you lift them up and then share what your need is, and just say, you know, I just don't want to be in that. I don't want to be in that environment. I don't allow my soul to become to hear that or to participate in that.
So that would be when we're ending up in that sort of criticism stage where there is no constructive request.
Exactly.
There's no.
It's just a complaining and complaining.
It's just a sort of attacking, blaming, and upset situation. I mean, I think we do have to protect our souls a little bit, and I think you said something super important there, Nick, when you said that what are they going through, or what have they been through? You know, sometimes most people's behaviors that get on our nerves or upset us have come from somewhere. You know, they were born and practiced for many years before they ended up in our situation at that time. And so when we start to enter that very judgmental mode, it is so important to look at, hey, like maybe this is something that they learned and practiced for many, many years in their own families of origins. You know, we're not probably going to change that.
Right.
You know, it's up to us to sort of adapt and change and do what works for us in order to accommodate what it is that we need in those situations. And most of the time the changing does kind of become our job. Right.
And sometimes just simply withdrawing ourselves from that. Once again, this show is dedicated to answering your questions. We're grateful that you are joining us tonight. We would invite you to call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can call and be anonymous and just simply share a question with us. We'll definitely get to it. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com, as well as share a question or comment as we're broadcasting live on our social media platform on Facebook under the Louhs, or on Ancient Faith's Facebook page. Here's a question that just came in, Roxanne. It says this. Greetings, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne. I'm an empty nester with grown children and small grandchildren, none of whom I get to see often. I always feel like I'm straddling between my own needs and theirs, and I'm never satisfied with my decisions no matter which way they go. I find it hard to focus on my own needs, and at this point, don't even know what those needs are. So I often feel guilty, not because of something sinful I've done, but because I feel like whatever decisions I make will make someone else unhappy. what can I pray in order to best take care of myself and yet keep peace in the family?
So I think what I hear being asked is sort of an empathetic struggle of sort
Mm-hmm.
of trying to live through the lens of what everyone else may need or
Mm-hmm.
want. And
Mm-hmm.
boy, is that a collision of needs, because no one thing we do satisfies all parties.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think what I would encourage is sort of coming back to what it is that God would yearn for me to do in my life for
Right.
His purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We really aren't supposed to be living to please others. We're looking to please God. And so, and listen, that's hard because sometimes that means disappointing others when we may have to set a tough
Mm-hmm.
boundary. But our purpose is for Him to make His purpose alive in our hearts. And if you've been somebody who's been taking care of someone your entire life, and are now an empty nester, and you were a strong empath,
Mm.
somebody who's very aware of other people's needs, you have a strong radar for what everyone around you needs, and then suddenly no one is around you with needs, you aren't used to thinking about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that can actually brew a lot of anxiety as well, because we are often avoiding a lot of our own reflection and taking care of
Right. And
others.
unmet needs.
Yep. And unmet needs. And so this is an important time of reflection. In fact, we just wrote a post about this the other day about self-reflection, and although it's kind of uncomfortable at times, God leads us to do that, and oftentimes places things on our hearts that we have to sit with. And that is a powerful time of growth when you're an
Mm-hmm.
empty nester. It is a powerful time of growth to reflect and pray about, what are you wanting to do with my life, God? What is it that you want me to be focused in on? And what are you looking to do through me?
And I love, Roxanne. One of the great things I love about our ministry is just the fact that we try to share two different perspectives on this. And I think just to build on what you're sharing, which I think is so appropriate, is for this person who I can only imagine how difficult that is on so many levels, because you obviously want to be spending more time with with the family, but are limited. And I'm sure there are obviously reasons for that, and also the emotional toll that it takes, the physical toll of what it takes. And so, let me kind of share with you that, on a spiritual level, what I would encourage you is that oftentimes in our love for people, sometimes we are not always aware of what our own needs are. So, what I would share with you and encourage you to do is, if and when you want to share what you're kind of feeling, because those feelings are what's going on inside of you, I would make sure that you share with your family members what you need, not what they're doing wrong. In other words, sharing them, okay, you know what? I actually would love to spend some time with you because I feel lonely, or I'm feeling right now that I really don't spend enough time with you guys. And just to be honest with you, I'd love to just kind of spend more time with the children and the grandchildren. Allowing yourself to be vulnerable and sharing those needs allows the potential of a combative situation to be lessened, because you're sharing really what you're feeling, not what they're doing wrong. And so I would encourage you to do that. And also, again, as you beautifully state, is that the word peace is so often mentioned in the Bible. It's mentioned countless times in our divine liturgy. So I would be asking for God to give you the peace. And what I would do is I would pray this offensively. Even when you're not seeing them, even when there's not an interaction taking place, but I call this offensive prayers. So the Bible says in the Lord's Prayer, lead me not into temptation. In other words, Christ, in praying this prayer, was telling us, hey, why don't we start praying offensively and not wait till we're in that temptation to begin praying? So offensively, I would probably say a prayer something similar to that Lord, you know what I'm struggling with. You know that what my deepest needs are, and what I'm needing you to work with. So Lord, I ask that you just simply guide me with the peace of allowing myself to not allow what I'm seeing around me affect me in the way it's affected me so much, but also to give me the words that I can share with my family members that would allow that to be seeds of love and not seeds that could potentially turn into resentment. I would also lift up in prayer them as well, that maybe that God work in their lives, allowing them to see what may be going on around. The Bible says in the book of James, the prayers of a righteous person are effective. It was the prayers The very first miracle that we see Jesus do, changing water into wine, is when the Virgin Mary says, "Do whatever He tells you to do." In other words, Mary's movement of telling Him about the wine being empty, the container being empty, led Christ through that movement for Him to change it from water into wine, because He says, "My hour has not yet come." But yet, through her calling that, allow that movement to take place. And so my encouragement again for you would be that in that prayer is, Lord, I'm just surrendering to you. I just want to live more in line with you. Allow that peace that I need to have and to come over me, and also the peace that comes along with my family members. So I hope that helps you out.
I think that spirit of unity is important to always remember as well, that, when someone's asking to see you or disappointed that they couldn't see you, again, what's underneath that? Just the need to see you, the desire to see you. So, looking for that positive request as opposed to following the complaint or feeling guilty or defensive. It's like, okay, they just want to see me more. And just as a practical last tip, I would say schedule dependable times that you can see your family members each week, so that we're never going too long trying to merge schedules and it doesn't work out, and then we're feeling guilty, meeting our own needs. When it's dependable and we can rely on it, and we know when it's happening, we're much more likely to get our needs met in ways that that don't infiltrate our own needs.
Roxanne, we're going to get to this next question, but I do want to once again remind all of our listeners tonight that you can call in with a question at 1-855-237-2346, 1-855-237-2346, or email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com, or post a comment or a question on our Facebook page, as we're broadcasting live on the Louh's and Ancient Faith's Facebook page. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you have not registered to receive our daily inspirational messages, do it right now as you're listening to this show. You can go to thelouhs.com. That's LOUHS.com. Click on the subscribe button, and all you have to do is simply put in your email address. And every single day, we will send you a little word of encouragement. And if you're already receiving them, please do us a favor. Tell your friends and your family to also register to receive these messages. We just want to make them in a way that inspires this world, and just kind of do something a little bit from Jacksonville that helps to give light to the rest of this world. So thanks again for joining us tonight. Roxanne, this is a question that came in that so many parents are going through as their children are graduating from high school and going off to college. Here's the question. It says, my question is about some coping mechanisms for parents who have separation anxiety with children who are going off to college and leaving the nest.
Oh my gosh, what a powerful question, and one that so many started to face this spring when they're so excited and celebrating all the graduation and, entrances into these great colleges. And then the reality set in. Oh no, my life is about
We're spending so much time getting them to college, and then it's like, wait a minute.
On how we feel about what's about to
think it's how we're going to be, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's like that sudden moment where you realize that glorious energy that kids bring to your lives, the light that they bring, the animation that they bring, their ability to sort of change the emotional climate in your household. It's about to leave. And we have to figure out how to fill our own lives and kind of come back to a place of what our own energy looks like. And so there are powerful feelings that come along with that. And I would say that sadness is one of them. Anxiety is the second. And most mothers do have a bout of grief, interestingly enough, after they drop their kids at college. But 9 out of 10 of those parents move on from it within a month or two. And they when they start to kind of realize they have their own life back, they start to reconnect with an identity that they sort of had pre-kids. And that grief and the anxiety that you've had about your kids for all that time is not totally gone, but it begins to be chipped away, I would say, by the relief that you have, that you can kind of focus a little more of your energies on things that were very powerfully important to you, maybe pre-kids. We have 2 kids ourselves, and they do occupy, I would say, probably 80% of internal capacity reserves in a given day, just, treating basic needs, worrying about, anticipating, helping them with. And they're beautiful gifts from God, but they do occupy a lot of us. And There are convictions that God has on our hearts. He still has a purpose for you. Now, that's kind of like chapter 2 of your life, but you have 3, 4, 5, 6, and God willing, many, many more after that, that God is still looking to use you in this world. And so maybe it's now thinking about, okay, I'm going to conquer some of this anxiety by focusing in on my family, my marriage, my other relationships. Maybe I'm going to focus on finding new ways to communicate very regularly with my kids who I'm shipping off to college. Maybe I'm going to kind of get into a means, some sort of a rhythm with them, maybe where I send scripture daily. I find ways to encourage daily. We have certain times where we FaceTime daily. I know it sounds very practical and simple, but believe it or not, these are things we don't always put into place before kids leave, and we don't manage expectations very well. And there are kids who call 5 times a day, and there are kids who don't pick up the phone at all. So I do think it's important to sort of set your kids up with the expectations you have for what is important, and to equip them with the top 5 values you want them to leave with. You've probably been parenting through them most of your life, because we do parent out of our values. Even if we've never consciously stated it in that way, we do parent out of our values. And so it's really important, though, to sort of have those very important conversations before they go off, that, hey, listen, you're going to have a lot of independence. Here are the top 5 values that we want you and your heart to be led by. And that's something I would just continue to check in with them about. It's also maybe important to think about mentors in your children's lives. It's important that kids have adult mentors they can speak with outside of you, the parent, and no better time than college, because they are off on their own with lots of new influences, lots of new surroundings. And so it is important that you maybe equip them with, people who are calling to check on them other than you. But anxiety is a pretty natural feeling with any change, especially if you're someone who has dealt with anxiety about other things. This is going to be no different. And with any change comes that anxiety voice and that anxiety-ridden voice. So, but again, one thing I would tell you in any anxious situation is, you're definitely not the only one in control, and you're not the only one loving and caring for your child. God has your back. And remembering that, praying through every worry that you have, remembering He's in control and He loves them more than you do, is one way to sort of ease that nervous energy about what could be happening in their lives.
And I think it's important too, Roxanne, that we encourage our listeners that when they're going through that level of anxiety, one thing about anxiety is that it's the Greek word for it it literally means to strangle. It allows us to it stifles us, stifles our abilities to be productive. And so recognize that that season may have come to an end, but I would also utilize that energy that you're having and refocus it. Redirect it. So redirect your energy to things that maybe you have put off, that you haven't been able to do over some time, or to refocus or redirect your energy into doing something very specific that gives you some joy. Maybe it's a volunteer opportunity, or doing something at your church. But it allows you to utilize your God-given gifts to create within you to allow you to do what you were designed to do, because anxiety is one of those spiritual battles that oftentimes takes us away from doing the things that God wants us to do, so we can live in that, if you will, the quicksand of unhappiness or worry about our children. And yes, there's a natural level of worry, but sometimes it allows it to be unproductive. So it's just a worry, anxious way of being without being productive. So definitely refocus your energy to doing something very productive and doing the things that God designed us to do. So making a difference every day, speaking life into other people, maybe becoming a mentor for some children that are in your youth group at your church, but allowing those gifts that you do have to use them to help spread and to spread seeds of hope and life in the people that are around you. Here's another question, Roxanne, that came in. It says, if I say I have high self-esteem, is that a sin, since we are not recognizing our abilities are from God? Any advice how to teach the nuance to kids, since society preaches people need high self-esteem or pride?
That's a really great question as well. We've had so many great thank you callers and emailers who've sent all these in. Feeling good about ourselves enough to go out and do God's will, attempt God's will, is important, because self-doubt actually greatly holds us back. Self-doubt can greatly hold us back, and I also feel is one of the voices of the enemy. So, as we go out into the world and sort of find success, I think it's important to remember and to know that our gifts and our strengths are not from us, they are from Him.
Right.
And they're intended for His purpose within us, not our own purpose.
Hmm.
So, in our successes, in everything that we achieve and have accomplished, knowing that it's by His providence, by His will, by His grace, by His gifts that He's given us, we're just kind of being stewards of those gifts. And so everything we do is kind of about bringing the attention back to
Hmm.
Him,
Hmm.
back to His purpose, making His name famous, not ours. And so, pride, if you think about pride as being kind of this, becoming almost excessively preoccupied with our own self-importance, our own achievements, our own status, it's really just for its own right, for our own worth.
Hmm.
Replacing God's glory with our own, that is missing the boat, right? So we don't really want to, it's not about entering pride, but having self-worth, self-respect, self-confidence is important to be able to go do what it is that He's called us to do.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think too, Roxanne, you said it beautifully. The gifts that we have are His gifts. The strengths that we have are His strengths. I love how someone once told me, says, "I am who I am because He created me to be this way." In other words, God has equipped and empowered each and every one of us. The Bible says in the book of Ephesians that He has created us as a masterpiece. So God has created us to do extraordinary things, as the book of Ephesians, that verse continues. But one of the things that I think the emailer is so right is that we're living in a world, Roxanne, that's constantly telling us that we need to have high self-esteem, that we need to have confidence and pride in ourselves. If we never tie it into the fact that Christ gave us these gifts, that when people acknowledge and say, "Gosh, you're just a great athlete," or "You're a great academic," or that you've done all these great things, if we never tie it back to, it's not me, it's Christ. It's Christ who's working in me, then it becomes sinful. And then it is a problem, and it becomes a root that we do. And I think in societies like America, where we have the potential for people to get success very quickly and have a lot of wealth, so often as they get more wealthy, as they accomplish more, what they believe are their own accomplishments, God is taken out of the equation, and it becomes less about what God did for them and what they did for themselves. And you even hear people say all the time, when I came to this country, I came with nothing, and look how I worked so hard to make what I made. And yeah, that's exactly right. You did work very hard, but it was God that gave you the strength to do that. It was God that gave you the opportunities. He's the one that opened those doors for us. So I would tell our children, as well as all of us, that be careful that if we never attach what we are good at to Christ, then we steal His glory.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think when it stops with us, it's pride.
Exactly.
When it becomes His purpose within us, it's God, right? It is connected to Christ. And I think that's important because young people today, when they are achieving something and it's all about self-esteem, it is more of a pride, movement to be proud of me for me in my own right. It's not necessarily attached to what am I going to use this for in my community? What am I doing with this to love the world, to give glory to God, and to make this world a better place? I mean, I think that's where we sort of access more His purpose with our gifts versus just our gift, right? What are we doing with it in the world? And we are supposed to unwrap those in the world. So it is, I think, powerful to sort of connect it back to Christ, yes,
and when you're
and to our purpose, to His purpose in our life.
Our son this past week is hosting a camp for refugee children here in the city of Jacksonville, and I'm so proud of him for doing this. I mean, he's a big soccer fan, and I mean, if he in his mind he thinks he's the next great soccer player, and so we obviously kind of keep him grounded. But one of the things that he shared with me recently after one of the days of the camp was that he looks at these children. Many of them are coming from parts of the Middle East. They're coming from Ukraine. They're coming from just areas of just Sudan. A great deal of impoverished nations. And you're looking at children that look like they're probably 12 or 13 that are actually 18 and 19 years old. They're just so malnourished. And I remember he said, I needed to see this. I needed to see how this is so I know how people around the world are living. And I think going back to our point, Roxanne, is that sometimes when we take those gifts that God gives us, and so in this case, God put in some small way, the love of soccer on George's heart. And when you use those gifts that God has given us to make a difference, it also allows us to create more humility and humbleness because we see what others do not
Oh,
have.
absolutely. When you go out trying to change someone's life and they change yours,
Hmm.
that's when you know that that gift is the work of the Holy Spirit. I'll never forget one of the kids at the camp was running around, without shoes. And I said to him, buddy, you can't play soccer without shoes. Go put your shoes on. He said, well, I gave them to my brother
Hmm.
because my brother doesn't have shoes
Hmm.
and I don't want him to get hurt.
Hmm. And whose brother was actually playing with us. So
Yeah, he was with us. Right. And I just got chills and I was speechless that this young 9-year-old boy, just humbled me in
hmm
the most amazing way that, here we are looking to change someone's life and it is them who are, who changed us.
hmm and
Um,
keeps that humility coming. I think that the more that we allow ourselves to do what God designed us to do to make a difference, the more grounded and a level of humility because we see the need that's out there so greatly out in this world.
absolutely. Absolutely.
You're listening to Live with the Louhs. We're grateful that you're joining us tonight, and we have been dedicating this show all to you. It's just an Ask the Louhs opportunity, and we're grateful that so many of you have sent email questions in. You can call us right now. There's a few minutes left in our show if you want to, and you can totally be anonymous if you'd like. The number is 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com because we're broadcasting also on our Facebook and on our Louh's Facebook page, as well as Ancient Faith's Facebook page. So if you have a question, please feel free to share it in the comment line. There's another question, Roxanne, that just came in. It says this. As a boss at my work, I often get frustrated with people or get ideas in my head about people and their work ethic that probably isn't true. Where I struggle as a boss is knowing where I need to intervene and what I should leave alone. Is this something I should pray and let God guide how I handle those frustrations, or pray that people are coming to work trying their best? Is it a sin to get mad at people when they aren't doing things right, when I know they know what right is?
So, yeah, this is about the experience of frustration with, what we see people not doing, not doing their best. And, when we perceive injustice, when we perceive something isn't fair or it isn't right. And by the way, certain dispositions have a much harder time with fairness and justice than others. And just by their disposition, just by personality type. And no, we shouldn't judge, but we should spend some time reflecting on those feelings and what they're trying to tell us. Emotions are a source of information. They are not the be all end all, fact in a situation, but they are a source of information that can prompt us to kind of take a look at a situation a little bit more deeply. They aren't necessarily truths, but we should explore. I would want to know, what is it about someone not doing their best that bothers the writer so much? Is it an indication of a value, perhaps that they were, brought up with? Or is it because you're sharing a project with them and all the work's falling on you, and as a result, you're coming home overwhelmed and upset and fighting at home with your family? There could be a lot of different variables as to why it's so bothersome. That's important to kind of reflect on, is to study that emotion and why is it that this is bothersome so much to this individual person? What value is being hit by this? And persistent anger and feelings of injustice directed at a person, they do kind of come with a steep price tag. We can't
Mm-hmm.
ignore the fact that they do rob us of happiness in the moment and can have a negative impact on our health, our intrusive thoughts. But we have to remember that the experience of frustration or anger is not a sin in and of itself,
Mm-hmm.
but it can motivate sin. So this is an important differentiation. Jesus got angry at injustice and wrongdoing. Okay. So in anger, we're called to watch the way we talk, not to let foul things come out of our mouth, not to develop negative narratives and start going into condemnation mode with other people, but to say things that help, to use our words for unity, for peacemaking, for solution finding, and for lifting others up. So, we really are looking to suddenly gain control over where we're letting our thoughts take us. And we're trying to also figure out why it is that this anger has been put on our heart.
Mm-hmm.
So it does take a bit of reflecting, but it also takes a bit of containing so it doesn't result in sin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, as a boss, one of the things, in many ways as a priest, You have a lot of, well, really in every leadership role that you have, in many ways, you're also a coach. You're motivating people to get the very best out of them. So in any, in leadership, you really want to be able to know your audience, know what they're good at, what their strengths are, and what they're not, and not to place really expectations that they really can't meet on them. I think so often employers get frustrated with their employees because they set these expectations that their staff are able to do because we kind of filter it through our own lens, only to realize that they're not really capable or do not have the capacity to do such. And that's very difficult, especially for people that are type A or very goal-oriented people, especially if you're working with someone that may not be that way. But God has created them in those unique situations, so we love them where they're at, and we continue to pour into them. But I just would recognize that part of what we do as an employer, in that role, is I would encourage you is to make sure that you're also finding what they're good at, finding their strengths, and leveraging what they're good at, and speaking life into those areas and figuring out ways to kind of inspire them to continue that. And then when there are areas that they're struggling with, is try to figure out ways to kind of to sit down with them. One of the greatest ways to teach staff is just literally sit down with them and show them through your actions what that vision ultimately looks like, and have them buy into it. And not only have you as the employer, but also have other employees who have already bought into that vision spend time with them. So those are just some subtle ways that you can continue to guide and to get a better work productivity out of the employees.
So we have so many questions. We're going to probably have to sift through these last few here and kind of pick and choose here. We'll go into one more here. My question is about a relationship, about marriage. I find it difficult to be vulnerable with my spouse. I find it difficult to share things that are sensitive to me because in the past, things I have shared come to be used against me, which feels like betrayal. With this lack of vulnerability, I find it difficult, if not impossible, to be intimate with him. And this has caused great strife. And the writer is asking for prayer. So if we could all pray for this marriage, that's important as well. So understanding this, the writer says, has sort of set me free to sort of express it and be vulnerable and asking, how to move forward. And just one thing I would say is, and this commonly happens in relationships.
Very much so.
This is about not having the right tools to know how to manage conflict healthily. Okay, so this isn't always vindictive or spiteful. It's often just, I don't know how to do this any better. And so when a spouse uses things they've said against you, it doesn't mean sharing was the wrong choice. It doesn't mean we should stop being vulnerable. It doesn't mean we should stop being who we are. It just means communicating about that continues to be the right choice. You see, the reason people do things like this is really a struggle in being vulnerable themselves. If they can use information against you, it puts them back in the seat of what's comfortable to them. So they're no longer on the defensive because now you are. So it's really a struggle with being able to be vulnerable. And many people were raised in homes where they were not allowed to be vulnerable. That was weak, or it was exploited. They were manipulated. It was not role modeled that vulnerability is a comfortable place to be. And so in order to sort of avoid, why people are doing this, they're avoiding being confronted with something you've brought up. Maybe they're trying to distract you and put you back on the defensive because you're making them uncomfortable. They are struggling with taking responsibility for something or ownership for something. And eventually, this tactic kind of works well because they're relieved. It kind of, you take the bait, get defensive, and then suddenly they're not having to deal with whatever it was you were talking about. And so, it's really a form of trying to influence and control a situation. And possibly, like I said, what they were raised with. And it can be deeply distressing when someone we love uses our words against us, and it does cause pain. It does feel like betrayal. So those feelings are pretty healthy feelings. But we have to bring our pain and struggle to God. We have to pour it out to him in our hearts and ask him to help us overcome that. The bitterness, the mistrust, because if we start to back away, if we start to move away, that's also a betrayal. Because we start to leave the marriage silently because we're no longer sharing. And so we have to be really careful. The enemy loves division. And so try as much as you can, if this is a tactic your spouse uses, to sort of make them comfortable in their own vulnerability. It's okay. When you're trying to share something with someone and they're getting defensive and using things against you, really do your best to try to make them comfortable in whatever they did wrong. Try not to blame, try not to use harsh words, try to align with them and, hey, I've messed up too. It's important to kind of bring in those sort of tactics so they feel more comfortable being in that vulnerable space.
Hmm.
Then it's less likely that they'll have to use those other tactics to sort of get out of that position.
Hmm.
But we want to try to avoid not, we want to avoid, basically closing ourselves off from that person because of that.
Right. And I think that, as we were mentioning at the earlier in the show, I think it's extremely important too for our emailer to remember that, some people do not have, as you beautifully stated, Roxanne, do not have the capacity or may not have the tools that they need to give you the counseling or the comfort or the listening ear that you're looking for when you share something very vulnerable. And oftentimes, because they were never really guided in how to conflict resolve, they will, especially in bouts of rage or anger, will use sometimes your most vulnerable parts of what you have shared in a conversation against you. And so I think that, in addition to what Roxanne was sharing, I would share with you as well that in those moments where there is peace, where there is, just a level of just calm between the two of you, is to share. I want to be able to share with you what's going on in my heart, what struggles I'm facing. I want you to be my safe base. But sometimes I want you to know that, and I need that. I need that. That's something that I truly need. And I just want you to know that how much I need that. And I hope that you'll allow that to happen without it being something that could be used in a way that could undermine not just me. What it's undermining is our marriage. It's undermining the sheer foundation of our marriage. So in those moments, is to, if there's opportunities where there is moments or seasons of peace, is to share that, because as Roxanne was saying, you don't want to be withdrawing, but also you want to be very careful because their inability to conflict resolve, you don't want to be at the expense of you sharing something that's so vulnerable to you that it becomes a weapon against you. You've already suffered through it one time. And that's why you were sharing it. You don't want to be used to be continuously suffering with that. So make sure that they're aware of that. Again, sharing what you need, not what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, I mean, trust are the walls of a marriage, right? If Christ is our foundation, trust are the walls of our home. When they fall, it's very hard to sustain a home. Don't be afraid to just state that directly, that it hurts when you use things like that against me, but to really kind of come back to what it is that we were trying. You don't really want to be derailed by that. A lot of times I call that the rabbit hole, when somebody in conflict goes down that road and tries to kind of get you off of what you were talking about. We don't really want to take that bait, follow them down to that rabbit hole. It's a dead end. You kind of mentioned that hurts, of course, and then we kind of come right back to where we were, but trying to make them feel safe and acknowledging and dealing with whatever it is that we were trying to bring up to begin with before that hurtful comment sort of came out. So these are tricky communication tactics, but mostly lack of good tools, not usually evil intent in the heart. So I do think compassion is good. And as Elder Thaddeus once said, it is of great significance if there is one person, just one person, who truly prays in a family. Prayer attracts God's grace, and all the members of the family will feel it, even those whose hearts have grown cold. So pray always, even if you're the only one praying.
Absolutely. We want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight on this special episode of Live with the Louhs, as we've dedicated the show to answering your questions. I cannot tell you how many more emails that we are getting in as we're going live, as well as those that we did not even get to that came to us prior to the show. We will definitely get to those on a future episode of Live with the Louhs. We do want to once again invite all of you to join us on our daily inspirational messages that we send out. You can go to thelouhs.com right now. That's Louhs, thelouhs.com, and click on the subscribe button. Simply put in your email address, and every day you will receive a daily word of encouragement and inspiration from us. And I hope that if you are already receiving it, that you'll take an opportunity to share it, please, with your family and friends, and invite them to also join our inspirational messages. I also want to invite all of you that next Tuesday, we're dedicating a show to our young adults. In fact, we're doing an open forum for several young adults from all over the country to talk about really what is going on with our young adults, the transition from college to work life, the transition of trying to find that Mr. Right or Miss Right in our lives, the struggles of what young adults are dealing with. We're dedicating a show to talking with young adults from all over the country, and we hope that you'll join us. It'll be next Tuesday evening right here on Ancient Faith Radio at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to thank John Maddox, the CEO of Ancient Faith Radio, who's producing our show tonight. He's such an extraordinary man. We love him so much, and all of our friends at Ancient Faith for all that they do. If you love Ancient Faith, I tell you, please do your part and share Ancient Faith with all your friends and family, whether they're Orthodox or not. Just tell them about what the great resources that Ancient Faith provides, something that I think all of us benefit from every single day. My friends, take care. God bless you, and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.
New from Ancient Faith Publishing.
Welcoming Gifts, Sacrifice in the Bible and Christian Life by Jeremy Davis. You'll find surprising answers in this book. You'll learn that sacrifice had a very different significance for ancient people than it does for us today. You'll hear how it drifted